Battle Royale is the first chapter of Ralph Ellison's famous novel Invisible Man. The message is so powerful, it is often taught as a short story. It's set in the Deep South in the 1920s or the 1930s. The story begins with an older African-American narrator reflecting on his life over the past 20 years. He realizes that he has been asking the wrong people about who he should be, who he should become. He realizes he should have been asking himself this question all along. So how does he answer these questions, you might ask? He asserts, in the short story, that I am nobody but myself. But first, I had to discover that I am an invisible man. Whoa, the reader certainly isn't expecting that. Sounds like he has some self-image issues. The narrator then turns his reflections to his grandparents and reveals that they were once slaves. But once free, they lived their lives as model citizens, even though they weren't treated as equals in American society. And for a while, the narrator admits to being ashamed of their history, of his history. On his deathbed, the grandfather gives the narrator's dad some words of wisdom. He tells him that after his death, his son is to keep up the good fight, meaning to continue being a productive African-American citizen, make his family proud. But then he stuns everyone, including the narrator, who is standing in the room observing all of this as a mere child, when he adds, "Our life is a war, and I have been a traitor all my born days." In essence, he tells the narrator's dad to live his life fearlessly, as though he is fighting a war. And this is something the grandfather did not do himself, and ultimately regrets his inaction. Well, the rest of the family thought he'd lost his mind and did their best to dismiss the grandfather's so-called words of wisdom. They tell the narrator to forget what he's heard. But what happens when you tell a kid not to do something? Of course, his grandfather's words of wisdom stayed on his mind, and 20 years later, he's still thinking about what his grandfather meant. Despite his grandfather's plea, the narrator believes, as an adult, he has become his grandfather. His recognition by white society makes his family proud, but inside, he feels a tremendous amount of guilt. You might say, he too feels like a traitor. He thinks back to the day of his high school graduation. He delivers an outstanding speech in which he explains to his community how humility is the pathway for African Americans to be successful citizens in America. And he gladly accepts an invitation to give his speech at an event for the town's leading white citizens. However, when he arrives at the event, he's told that since he's already there, he might as well participate with some of his classmates in an event called the Battle Royale. He learns that he will have to box the other boys as a part of the entertainment that evening. As if that's not bad enough, they have to fight each other blindfolded, and they have to fight each other at the same time. He has very deep concerns, but he agrees to participate anyway. In some ways, the narrator thinks he's a little bit better than the other boys he's about to get into the ring with. They're a rough bunch, and they're willing to fight each other to make some much-needed money. He, on the other hand, he's there to deliver his much-praised speech. After changing into their boxing clothes and getting their boxing gloves, all of them are led into the main hall where they witness the most elite white men in their community getting wasted. Yeah, bankers, lawyers, judges, doctors, the who's who of the community, you might say. The boys are led to the front of the hall, herded like cattle for display. While standing there, they quickly become the backdrop for a naked blonde that dances for the drunken men. While she dances, two things happen. First, the boys' fears rise because they know they should not be looking at a naked white woman. Secondly, the woman has her own fears of the men as she is grabbed, fondled, and tossed about. She and the boys are afraid of these men. Once the dancing spectacle ends, the boys are told to get into the ring and do their best to beat each other up. They're blindfolded and the bell rings. The white men in the audience cheer them on while simultaneously shouting racial slurs at them. Somehow, not because of his talent, the narrator manages to survive long enough to be one of two finalists. When his blindfold is taken off, he discovers he is to fight the biggest guy of all, Tatlock. The entire time he fights Tatlock, though, he thinks about his speech, making sure he remembers every word while hoping and praying for the end of this fight. And it does end, or so he thinks, when Tatlock knocks him out. When it's time for the boys to get paid, their money is sprawled on top of a rug, mainly in the form of gold coins and some crumpled up bills. They're so excited they dive onto the rug, ready to battle it out again, only to be jolted by electrical currents and surrounded by heinous laughter and more racial slurs. After the white men have had their fill of entertainment, the narrator finally gets the opportunity to give his speech. The narrator speaks with pride and enthusiasm. Some of the men listen, but others talk and ridicule him by repeatedly telling him to repeat phrases over and over again. He's afraid. He doesn't want to say the wrong thing, but you know what happens when you try to avoid something. Of course, he accidentally says social equality instead of social responsibility, and all of the men stop talking. He quickly apologizes and set the men at ease, enough so they began to talk to each other again during his speech. He finishes his speech just as nervously as he began it, but he welcomes the round of applause he receives, as well as the brand new leather-bound briefcase he is awarded. He can hardly believe he's been given such a lavish gift. And when he is instructed to open the briefcase, he finds a scholarship to a state college for Negroes. He returns home elated and is congratulated by his family and friends. He is proud of his recognition. Even his grandfather's haunting last words do not worry him. But that night, he dreams of events that tell the reader his future. In the first part of his dream, he is at the circus with his grandfather, and his grandfather refuses to laugh at the clowns, regardless of how funny they are. In the second part of the dream, his grandfather tells him to open his briefcase, and inside of it is an envelope, not a scholarship. He looks inside the envelope and finds another one. He looks inside the next envelope and finds yet another one. He continues to look into each envelope until he reaches the last one. His grandfather tells him to open it and read what's inside. The story ends with him reading a final derogatory statement that directs the following instructions to whomever reads the letter: to keep him, the narrator, running. What does that mean? It means his grandfather was right. Accepting what people give you instead of taking what you deserve or earned will, in fact, keep you running. The Battle Royale is the first chapter